So today's Lessons from the Snow is about the relationship between expectations and assumptions. So when I travelled with the PNG orchids just over a year ago now, I talked a lot about, during that time, about some of the assumptions I learnt that I made in relation to my professional work with athletes and staff and so forth, because there were so many aspects of that journey and the decision making that we had to make as a squad and a team that were influenced by the assumptions that I made. And I think the point that I was making back then is that sometimes you don't know you've made an assumption until perhaps it comes a little bit unstuck. So I've been really mindful over the last year to pay attention to my own thinking and to try and work out if I'm making an assumption. You're not always going to be able to work that out, but it's been a bit of a curiosity thinking that I've had over the last 12 months. So we are now, and I'll do a quick little circle, in the most beautiful little town. Little town? It's not really a little town, but we are in the very, very beautiful Chamonix in the Alps in France. And so my expectations about coming here were high. So expectations are often about what we think about into the future, and in this case I was very much hopeful and optimistic and positive about what would be coming up for us in our trip to Chamonix. And I must say, in terms of expectations, it's absolutely exceeded my expectations, this beautiful little part of the world. So the village itself was much bigger than I thought, far more restaurants and cafes and little bakeries and opportunities to savour the French food. We found markets yesterday. So my expectations there of the village itself have been really high. But interestingly, my expectations of the skiing here were not met. And in part that's because maybe I could have done a bit more research into the region than I did. In part it's because of the weather. So we've had quite cloudy, overcast weather, which has significantly impacted the quality, the visibility, what's been open, the amount of snow and so forth. So it's partly that, but also it's because of some of the assumptions that I made. So what we found, particularly because we've come from Austria and now we're travelling through France, the assumptions that I made about the logistics of skiing in this particular region were not met. Now, partly that's, I could have done a bit more research around that, but in terms of travelling around, getting to gondolas, finding out where to go, assuming that you can store your luggage at the bottom of the gondola when you can't, assuming that you would even, like I assumed that you would be able to see the runs from the village, but what actually happens is, and is there one behind me? No. There's one behind me there. I don't know how well you can see it, but pretty much within this region you need to take a gondola to each of the peaks and then you ski over the backside. And so there's not actually even a lot of runs necessarily over the side, and then depending on the weather conditions, as I said, we've had the last 2 days where the weather conditions haven't been good. The first day we did go up on the Friday and you couldn't see anything. We had some challenges with our skis. My husband didn't get to do any runs. 2 of us did one run and our skis were faulty, so we had to take them back, and the kids managed to do a couple of runs before we came in. So in terms of skiing, it was a pretty disappointing day. And part of that is, if I had thought through my assumptions before we'd come over and done a little bit more research, then we may have potentially used our time in Chamonix as a different part of our trip. Anyway, please don't take this post as a complaint, because it most certainly is not. Chamonix is absolutely stunning. It's a beautiful part of the world. We're going to take a trip over to Courmayeur in 2 days' time. We're off to the ice hockey, so it's all great. But it has had me thinking about expectations and assumptions. And one of the things that you might like to consider moving forward is, when you have expectations about something that you're going to do, ask yourself, what are the assumptions you're also making? Because we know the expectations, as I said, are about our hopes or how we think something is going to go. And our assumptions are the beliefs that we have that may or may not be anchored in truth. So they're the ones that we need to watch out for. But as you can see, it is stunning, and my hand's quite cold now from having it out holding this phone, and I think the patisserie calls. So hopefully I've given you something to think about, and hopefully we'll We'll be skiing in Kormaya. I'm going to do a lot of research tonight to make sure that's going to be the case, and we'll report back for whatever lessons I learn in Kormaya.